The night was calm, the kind of calm that wrapped around a man's chest and made him feel safe, the kind of calm that carried whispers from the trees and tiny ripples from the lake. The stars above stretched endless, glittering like pieces of silver scattered across black velvet, and the moon hung heavy, its reflection shimmering on the surface of the water. The man stood by the edge, his boots pressed into the cool grass, his eyes soft as he gazed at the lake that had been his home and his heart for years. Slowly he bent down, pulling a small bundle from the back of his truck, and began setting up camp. It was nothing grand, just a canvas tent, a foldable chair, a lantern, and a kettle for heating water. Yet every movement he made carried a piece that no one could steal from him. His hands worked steady, tying ropes, hammering small stakes into the soil, and as he worked, the night filled with simple sounds, the croak of frogs, the distant hoot of an owl, and the faint splash of fish breaking the water's surface. To him this place was more than land, more than property. It was memory, it was legacy. It was the last piece of his family's bloodline that still breathed, and as he lit the lantern, casting a warm golden glow over his camp, he let out a long breath, a whisper of contentment. He pulled out an old book, its cover worn, and sat in the chair with the lantern light flickering across his face. He had only turned 2 pages when a sharp noise cut through the still night, the sound of gravel crunching under tires. His eyes lifted slowly, the peace in his chest replaced with a tightness. Across the curve of the path leading down to the lake, 2 sets of headlights appeared, growing brighter as they approached, their beams slicing through the darkness. First came a black SUV, sleek and polished, its license plate glinting. Behind it followed a patrol car, red and blue lights flashing silently. The sirens off but the threat loud. The man closed his book, placed it carefully on the chair and rose to his feet, his shadow stretching long behind him in the lights. The SUV came to a hard stop, dust swirling into the air. The doors opened sharply, and out stepped Karen, her heels clicking against the dirt as if she walked on marble. Her lips painted red, her eyes cold, her face twisted in a smile of victory. 2 HOA board members followed behind her, their clipboards in hand like soldiers armed for war. The patrol car stopped behind them, too. Officers stepping out slowly, their flashlights cutting through the night. One adjusted his belt, his hand brushing the radio, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the scene. Karen's voice pierced the silence, loud and sharp. "There he is, caught in the act, camping illegally on HOA property." Her hands stretched toward him like a queen delivering judgment. The man stood still, his arms at his side, his expression unreadable. Only his eyes glimmered, reflecting the lantern light. One officer stepped closer, his voice firm. "Sir, we've received a complaint that you are trespassing on community land. We need to see identification and proof of permission." The board members smirked. One whispered loudly enough for the neighbors, peeking through their curtains to hear. "He's finally finished. No one defies the HOA and walks away free." Karen raised her chin higher, her arms folded across her chest. "Arrest him if he resists. I want him gone tonight." Her words carried arrogance, thick and heavy. The neighbors on porches whispered, phones lifting discreetly to record. But no one dared speak out loud. The man's face remained calm, too calm. He slowly reached for his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and handed the officer his ID without a word. His silence unnerved them. Karen expected shouting anger, but instead his composure felt dangerous, like a storm gathering beyond the horizon. The officer shined his flashlight on the card, nodded, and asked, "Do you have proof of permission to camp here, sir?" The man tilted his head slightly, his lips curling into the faintest of smiles, his voice finally breaking the silence, low and steady. "Permission?" he said. "Do I need permission to stand on my own ground?" His words froze the officer for a moment, but Karen jumped in before he could reply, her voice loud. "Don't listen to him, he's lying, he doesn't own this. This land belongs to the HOA. We've maintained it for years. Our rules forbid camping. It's against community standards, and he knows it." She pointed sharply at the tent as if it were a crime scene. Her board members nodded furiously, parroting her words. "Yes, he's violating policy. He's ignored notices before, he thinks he's above the law." Their voices overlapped, a chorus of false authority, but the man remained unmoved, his silence pressing down on them heavier than any scream. The officer shifted, uneasy, glancing at his partner, then back at Karen, then at the man. "Sir, do you have any documents to support your claim?" The man looked into his eyes, then past him, at the lake shimmering under the moonlight. His silence stretched so long the neighbors held their breath. Finally he spoke again, his words soft but cutting. "Are you sure you want to ask me that?" The officer frowned. "What do you mean?" The man stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, every movement making Karen's smug smile falter. "I mean," he said, his voice heavy, "if I show you the truth, it won't just prove me right, it will prove them wrong, and once that happens, this whole board won't just lose their claim, they'll lose everything." His words sent a ripple of unease across the dock. Neighbors exchanged glances. The officers stiffened. And Karen's face twisted, her confident mask slipping. "He's bluffing? Don't listen to him. Just arrest him already?" She shrieked, but the man's calm tone cut through her noise. "Bluffing?" he asked, raising his brow. "Then why are you shaking?" Her hand trembled slightly at her side. Her eyes flickered to the neighbors recording with their phones. She snapped at the officers, "Do your job!" But the officers hesitated, the weight of the man's composure pressing harder than her orders. The night air thickened, the lantern flickered, the water lapped against the shore as if waiting for the next move. The man stepped back slowly, returning to his chair, picking up his book again, his silence returning like a blade sheathed but ready. His calmness screamed louder than Karen's arrogance, and though no arrest was made that night, everyone present knew one thing. This was not the end, this was only the beginning, and when the truth came out, it would not be the man in handcuffs, it would be the very people who called the cops on him. Karen's heels dug into the gravel as she marched closer, her voice loud enough to wake the birds in the trees. "Officers, don't let his calm fool you. This man is trespassing. This land belongs to the HOA. It has always belonged to us, and he's been a problem for years." She waved a thick folder in her hand, the papers inside shuffling dramatically as if their noise could add weight to her lies. The officers stood side by side, their flashlights catching the shine of her expensive earrings. Their faces steady but uncertain. One raised his hand politely. "Ma'am, we'll need to see exactly what proof you have." Karen snapped the folder open, pulling out typed notices with bold HOA stamps. She held them up like trophies. "These are official violations filed against him. Here's one from last summer when he built that illegal fire pit. Here's another when he cut down trees without board approval, and here," she paused dramatically, pulling out a page with a red stamp. "This is a final warning, signed by me, ordering him to stay off this lakefront property." Her words echoed, her smile grew. The board members behind her nodded and muttered their approval. Yes, he ignored every warning. He thinks he's untouchable. Rules mean nothing to him. Their voices overlapped like a choir rehearsed too many times, their tone dripping with false authority. The neighbors hiding on porches leaned forward, their phones trembling in their hands as they recorded, whispering to each other. She brought papers again. She always waves papers but never real proof. "Look at him, he's not even flinching." The man remained still by the lantern light, his hands folded across his chest, his calm expression making Karen's performance look more desperate with every second. The taller officer took the papers from her, shining his flashlight across them, his brow furrowing as he skimmed the bold text. "These are HOA violation notices, not land deeds," he said slowly, his voice cautious. "They show you fined him, but they don't show ownership." Karen's smile froze for a split second before she forced it back, her voice rising shrill. "The HOA represents this community. The board has authority. When we find someone, it means they are in violation of our property standards. Therefore it's ours to regulate." She shoved her finger toward the ground like she was planting a flag. "He doesn't own this land. He's just squatting here because he thinks no one can stop him." The officer exchanged a glance with his partner, both uneasy, because they had expected a simple trespass case. But what Karen showed them looked more like paperwork about neighborhood disputes than actual ownership. The partner asked carefully, "Do you have land records, ma'am?" "Deeds filed with the county." Karen's face twitched, her eyes flicked to the board members, who suddenly looked down at their shoes. She stammered, Those records are complicated. We don't have them on hand. But our authority is clear. The HOA rules are binding. Her voice cracked at the end, but she quickly covered it with another shout. Don't let him trick you with silence. He's a manipulator. He's been living here illegally, and he's dangerous. He threatens our community. She turned toward the man, her eyes blazing. Tell them the truth. Admit you don't own this. But the man's face never changed. His lips curled faintly, his eyes steady. He gave no answer. That silence was heavier than her folder of papers, heavier than her shouting. It unnerved the officers more than her accusations. The neighbors whispered again. One said softly, if he didn't own it, why isn't he fighting? Why isn't he afraid? Another replied, because maybe he knows something she doesn't. Karen grew more frantic, her arms flailing as she tried to fill the silence. Officers, you have to act. You have to arrest him now. This is trespassing. This is illegal camping. This is criminal. But even her board members weren't nodding as eagerly anymore, sweat beading on their foreheads, their eyes darting to the man's still figure. The taller officer finally lowered the papers and looked at Karen with suspicion. Ma'am, we can't arrest someone based only on HOA violation slips. We need to verify actual property ownership before we can proceed. Karen's face twisted in rage, her hands shaking. Don't you see? If you don't stop him now, he'll take over this whole place. He'll destroy everything we built. But her voice sounded more like a plea than a command now, her mask of control slipping with every word, while the man remained silent. His calm presence louder than her fury, making everyone wonder what truth he was hiding that made him so untouchable. The night air grew colder as Karen's shouting echoed across the lake, her voice shrill, her folder of papers flapping in her hands like broken wings. The officers stood uneasy, their flashlights moving between her red face and the man's still figure. Neighbors behind curtains whispered nervously, their phones glowing faintly as they recorded every second. But the man did not flinch. He simply stood near his lantern, his shadow long on the ground, his calmness strange, unsettling, almost dangerous. Finally, one officer stepped closer, his tone steady but edged with doubt. Sir, do you have anything to say about these accusations, these violation notices, this claim that you don't belong here? The neighbors held their breath, waiting for him to explode in anger, waiting for him to shout, to defend himself. But instead he bent down slowly, picked up his kettle, poured water into a small tin cup, and set it gently by the lantern. The soft sound of water pouring cut sharper than Karen's screams. He looked at the officers, his eyes steady, his voice low but heavy. Say? What's there to say when lies shout louder than truth? What proof do they have besides paper they wrote themselves? His words were calm, but they hit harder than any outburst. The crowd shifted uneasily. Karen's face twisted. She snapped, don't let him fool you with riddles. He's stalling. He has nothing. He knows he's caught. She pointed at his tent like it was evidence of a crime. See? He's camping illegally right now. Arrest him. But the man didn't move, didn't shout. He simply packed the book he had been reading, folded the blanket on his chair, and began rolling the rope of his tent. Each movement, slow, deliberate, as if he had all the time in the world, as if none of this chaos touched him. His silence cut deeper with every action, making Karen's frantic voice sound weaker. One officer muttered under his breath, "Why isn't he nervous?" His partner replied softly, "Because maybe he knows something we don't." Karen heard them and grew louder. "Don't you dare doubt me. The HOA owns this land. I am the president. My authority is the law here." She turned to the neighbors, shouting, "You all know the rules. You've all paid fees. You've all seen him break them. Tell them, tell the police." But no one spoke. No neighbor stepped forward. Their silence stung sharper than words. Their eyes lingered on the man who still packed calmly under the lantern's glow. When he finally finished, he stood tall, his shadow stretching across the dock, and looked straight at Karen, his lips curling faintly, his voice steady. "Are you sure you want to push this, Karen? Are you sure you want the law to look too closely?" The words dropped like stones into the lake, ripples spreading through the crowd. Even the officers shifted, their eyes narrowing. Karen's face went pale for just a moment before she forced her smile back. "Don't listen to him. He's bluffing. He's desperate. He has nothing. But her voice cracked, betraying her fear. The man took one step closer, the light catching his face, his tone sharper now. You called the police, you wanted a stage. Fine. But remember this, stages don't just show actors. They reveal the truth too. His calmness carried more weight than all of Karen's shouting. The neighbors leaned in, their whispers rising. He knows something. Why isn't he scared? What is he hiding? The officers exchanged another glance, realizing this was no simple trespassing case. One of them cleared his throat, his tone cautious now. Sir, we'll need to verify county records before any arrest is made. Karen's mouth fell open, her body stiff. What? You can't do that, he's guilty, you can see it. But no one looked at her anymore. All eyes were on the man, calm and unbroken. His silence now a weapon. His stillness more dangerous than any protest. And though the night was quiet again, everyone knew this was just the beginning. Because the man's calm had turned the board's arrogance into fear, and the truth he hinted at was about to shake the entire lake. The flashing lights of the patrol car cut across the dark road as it rolled slowly. Toward the small-town police station, the man sat in the back seat, calm. His hands resting on his knees, his face unreadable. His eyes fixed on the glowing lanterns outside the window as the town drifted by. The officers glanced at him through the mirror now and then, expecting fidgeting, anger, some sign of guilt, but he remained steady like stone. His silence heavier than the hum of the engine. Behind them Karen's SUV followed close, her headlights blazing, her voice still echoing in the officers' minds, loud, shrill, demanding action. When the vehicles pulled into the station lot, Karen was the first to slam her door and march inside. Her folder clutched like a weapon, her board members scrambling behind her. The man stepped out calmly when the officers opened the door. His boots striking the pavement slow and deliberate. The crowd of neighbors who had followed at a distance now gathered near the entrance, their whispers spreading like sparks. Some filming quietly, curious how far Karen's arrogance would go. Inside the station the fluorescent lights hummed. The walls lined with bulletin boards, old wanted posters, and the faint smell of coffee hung heavy in the air. At the front desk a tired clerk looked up, frowning as Karen stormed toward him, slamming the folder on the counter. Arrest him. He's trespassing on HOA land. He's been violating community rules for years, and tonight we finally caught him red-handed. Her voice echoed across the small room. The clerk blinked, adjusted his glasses, and slowly pulled the folder toward him. The officers behind her exchanged uneasy looks. The man stepped inside quietly, his presence calm but commanding. The clerk opened the folder, flipping through pages. HOA violation notices, fines, photographs of fences and trees, signatures in Karen's bold handwriting. He frowned deeper, muttering, "These are internal notices, not county records." Karen slammed her hand on the desk. "They are proof of our authority. They show his pattern of violations. They are more than enough to charge him." The clerk leaned back in his chair, unimpressed. "Ma'am, these show you find him. Not that you own the land." The words cut sharp. The board members behind Karen shifted nervously, their eyes darting to the man who stood silent near the corner. His calm figure making their stomachs twist. Karen's face flushed red, her voice rising. "Check your records then, you'll see. The lakefront belongs to the HOA. It has always belonged to us." The clerk sighed, turned to his computer and began typing. The room grew quiet except for the clicking keys. The neighbors outside pressed closer to the windows, straining to see. Karen tapped her foot impatiently, muttering under her breath, "You'll see, you'll all see." But when the clerk's brow furrowed deeper, her stomach turned cold. He clicked again, pulled up another file, then looked at her sharply. "According to county land records, this shoreline is not listed under the HOA. It is registered under a private deed, one that predates your association by decades." Gasps filled the room. The board members paled. Karen's hands trembled. No, that can't be right. Check again. Check under community property," she demanded, her voice breaking. The clerk typed again, searched deeper, then shook his head slowly. "Nothing under HOA. Nothing under community property. It all leads back to one name." His eyes lifted, meeting the man's, his voice calm. "His name." The room fell into stunned silence. The man finally stepped forward, his boots echoing on the linoleum floor. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a worn leather folder, and set it gently on the counter beside Karen's papers, his voice low but sharp. "You checked the records, now check the originals." He unfolded the yellowed pages, deeds stamped with seals, signatures in ink faded but still powerful. The clerk leaned closer, nodding slowly. "These match the files. They are authentic." Karen gasped as if struck, her folders sliding from the counter, papers scattering across the floor. She scrambled to pick them up, her voice frantic. "Forgery. It has to be forgery. He can't own this. We've controlled it for years. We've collected fees. We've enforced rules. It's ours." But her words sounded hollow now. The neighbors at the windows whispered louder, filming every second. The officers crossed their arms, their suspicion shifting toward her instead of the man. The clerk leaned back in his chair, his voice calm but final. "Collecting fees on property you don't own sounds a lot like trespassing, ma'am." The words hit like thunder. Karen froze, her eyes wide, her empire slipping from her grip, and the man stood quiet beside her, his silence heavier than any accusation, his calm now the sharpest weapon in the room. The station air felt heavier now, every eye locked on the man as he slowly unfolded the old leather folder he had carried with him. The creak of the worn hinge. Loud in the silence, Karen's scattered papers still littered the floor, her hands trembling as she tried to gather them. But no one looked at her anymore, all eyes were on him, the quiet figure who had not raised his voice once, yet carried the weight of truth like a weapon. He placed the first page on the counter. The paper yellowed with age, edges curled, but the ink still bold, the seal pressed deep into the fibers, county approved and untouchable. The clerk leaned forward, his glasses sliding down his nose, his eyes scanning carefully. Then he nodded slowly. "This is authentic. This was filed over 40 years ago." He whispered. The officers moved closer, their flashlights catching the red stamp still shining faintly. One of them murmured, "Older than the HOA." The man placed another page, then another, each deed covering not just the cabin but the entire shoreline, the dock, the stretch of land Karen had called hers for years, each page stacking like bricks in a wall too high for her to climb. The neighbors outside pressed closer against the glass, phones recording, mouths open as they watched the truth unfold. Karen finally found her voice. Though it shook, this doesn't mean anything. These are outdated, old records. They don't apply anymore. We are the HOA. We updated everything. Her words cracked as the clerk lifted his hand to silence her, his voice firm. "Old records don't expire when they are still legal and active. These deeds were never transferred, never sold, never forfeited. This property has belonged to his family all along." Karen's knees weakened. She clutched the desk, her lipstick smearing as she bit her lip. One of her board members whispered nervously, "Is this true?" Another hissed, "How did we not know?" Their voices shook, betraying their loyalty breaking under the weight of real evidence. The man laid the final page down, his hand firm, his voice steady. "For years you fined me, for years you threatened me, and for years you claimed this lake was yours, but the truth was here the whole time, in black and white, older than your rules, older than your board, older than your lies." His eyes swept across the room, sharp and calm. His silence after the words cut deeper than shouting. The clerk stacked the papers neatly, placing a protective cover over them, his tone official. "This is proof beyond question. The shoreline and dock belong to him. The HOA has no legal authority here." Gasps erupted outside the glass, neighbors cheering softly, their whispers now bold. "I knew it. She was lying all along. She stole from us." The officers straightened. One turned to Karen, his voice low but edged with accusation. "Ma'am, do you realize what this means? You've been collecting money, enforcing rules on property you never owned." Karen's eyes widened, her head shaking violently. No, you don't understand. We were maintaining it, keeping it clean. We made it better. It belongs to us by right of use, by community need." But her excuses sounded desperate, pathetic, drowned out by the neighbors' voices and the man's silent stare. The calm in his eyes a mirror to her panic. Karen slammed her palm on the desk. "He tricked you all, he must have hidden this. No one hides deeds unless they're scheming." Her shriek rattled the room, but even her own board members stepped back, their faces pale, sweat on their brows. One whispered, "She's finished?" The clerk ignored her rant, stamping the copies with a fresh seal, his voice steady. "Records prove the truth, and the truth is not on your side." Karen's folder slipped from her hands again, papers scattering like the last pieces of a broken crown. The man picked up his book from where it rested on the chair, placed it under his arm, and looked at her one final time, his voice quiet but sharp enough to cut the air. "You thought calling the police would end me, but all you've done is put a spotlight on your lies, and now everyone will see what you've been hiding." The words landed heavy, Karen's shoulders slumped, her lips trembling, her empire cracking, while the neighbors' voices outside grew louder, braver. Like a storm rising, the tide had turned, and for the first time in years, Karen was the one trapped. Karen's voice cracked like glass under pressure as the clerk's words echoed through the station. "The HOA has no legal authority here." Her knees bent slightly as if her legs could no longer carry her, but she forced herself upright, her pride fighting against reality, her painted lips twisted, her eyes darting wildly from the clerk to the officers to the man who stood calm, unbroken, silent as stone. No, you don't understand. He's tricking you. These papers must be fake. He probably bribed someone, or forged signatures. You can't believe this. You can't side with him." Her voice rose to a scream, desperate and shaky, her arms flailing as she pointed at the yellow deeds on the desk. The board members behind her shifted, their faces pale, sweat dripping down their temples. One whispered nervously, "But the clerk confirmed them." Another muttered, "What if we've been wrong all these years?" Their whispers weren't quiet enough. Neighbors outside the glass heard them and recorded eagerly, the murmurs spreading like fire. "They didn't even know. She lied to all of us. We've been paying for nothing." Karen whipped around, glaring at her board, her voice venomous. "Don't you dare betray me. Don't you dare forget who put you in those seats. You wouldn't have a board without me." But her power was already slipping. Their eyes avoided hers, their loyalty cracking like weak branches in a storm. The taller officer stepped forward, his tone firm now. "Ma'am, you need to calm down. Yelling won't change the records, they're clear." His words made her face burn hotter. She jabbed her finger at the man again. "He's manipulating you. Don't you see? He's dangerous. He's been scheming against us for years. He wants to take everything." Her voice turned shrill, panicked, almost hysterical. But the man didn't move, didn't speak. He simply looked at her with those calm eyes that made her panic worse, his silence louder than her screams. The clerk spoke again, his tone official. "Ma'am, if you and your board have been collecting fees on property that doesn't belong to you, that could be a legal matter and not in your favor." The words made her stumble back, her face pale. No, that's not true. We were protecting the community, maintaining the land, cleaning it, keeping it safe. That gives us rights. It has to give us rights." But even her excuses sounded hollow now. Neighbors pressed against the glass, shouted through, their voices clear. "You stole from us. You threatened us. You lied for years." Their anger grew louder, the recordings on their phones capturing every word. One board member finally stepped back from her, shaking his head. "I never signed up for this." Another muttered, "If this goes public, we're finished." Karen spun on them, screaming, "Cowards! You think you can abandon me now? You're nothing without me." Her voice cracked again, tears mixing with her rage, mascara streaking down her cheeks. She looked less like a leader and more like a cornered animal. The officers shifted closer, one hand near the radio, just in case. But the man finally spoke, his voice soft but sharp enough to silence the room. "You built your power on fear, on lies, and on money that was never yours, but fear always breaks, lies always burn, and money always leaves when truth arrives." His words cut deeper than her screams. Karen's chest rose and fell in short, frantic breaths, her hands trembling so badly she dropped the last of her papers. They scattered across the floor like dead leaves. No one bent to help her. Not even her board. Not even the officers. She was alone, her empire crumbling in front of everyone. Her voice broke one final time, weak, almost pleading. "You can't do this to me. I am the HO, I am the law here." But her words fell flat. The neighbors outside laughed bitterly, shouting back, "Not Anymore. Your law is over? Karen staggered, her back hitting the wall, her head shaking as if denial could hold the world together. But the truth had shattered it already. Her collapse was not just in her legs or her voice. It was in her power, in her crown ripped away, in her image crushed under the weight of real evidence. And as the man stood silent, calm, unmoved, everyone in the room understood one thing. Karen had lost more than an argument. She had lost everything she had ever used to control them. The station no longer belonged to Karen. The weight of power had shifted quietly but completely. The neighbors outside no longer whispered. They spoke loud and clear, their voices strong. We've been scammed for years. She took our money. She bullied us. The officers inside exchanged firm glances, no longer treating Karen as the accuser but as someone under suspicion. The clerk stacked the man's deeds neatly, his stamp sealing them official once more. He looked up at the officers and said in a tone that carried finality, "Ownership is not in question, the records are clear, the shoreline and the dock belong to him, not the HOA." The taller officer crossed his arms and turned to Karen. "Ma'am, I think you and your board may have some serious explaining to do." Karen shook her head violently, her hands trembling. "No, you don't understand. We were protecting the community. We kept this place alive. Without us, everything would fall apart." Her words came fast, frantic, but they were no longer commands. They were excuses, desperate and hollow. Her board members stepped away from her like rats leaving a sinking ship. One muttered under his breath, "We didn't know. We only followed orders." Another said louder, "This was all her idea. She forced us into it." Karen spun on them with wild eyes. "Traitors, cowards, you wouldn't have had power without me." But they didn't move back to her side. They didn't defend her. They let her stand alone, broken and trembling. The neighbors outside began chanting now, their voices uniting. "No more HO, no more HO." The sound rolled through the glass, filling the station like a storm. Karen clutched her head, screaming over them. "Stop it! Stop it! You can't take this from me. I am the president. I am the law." But her voice was swallowed by the roar of the people she once controlled. The officers shifted their stance, their bodies angled toward the man now, their respect clear. The shorter officer cleared his throat. "Sir, we owe you an apology for the trouble. It seems this situation is not what we were led to believe." The man gave a single nod, his silence calm and steady, his presence commanding without effort. The neighbors pressed against the glass, cheered louder, filming every second, knowing. The truth was finally exposed. Karen lunged toward the desk, her hand reaching for the deeds. But the clerk slammed his hand down first, his voice sharp. "Don't touch what isn't yours." Karen froze, her chest heaving, her face pale as chalk, her fingers curling back slowly, her eyes darting to the man who hadn't even flinched. His calm was the sharpest weapon in the room. His silence louder than her screams. He finally spoke, his voice low but clear enough for all to hear. "You used fear to rule them. You used lies to control them. But fear breaks when truth arrives, and truth is here now." His words spread through the crowd like fire. The neighbors erupted again, their voices filled with relief and anger. The officers turned their backs on Karen and faced the man instead. "Is there anything you'd like us to do from here?" One asked carefully. Karen's mouth fell open. "What? You're asking him?" she screamed. "I'm the president. I give the orders." But no one listened. Her words fell into the air like stones into a bottomless well, ignored and forgotten. The board members kept stepping back until they stood against the wall, their eyes glued to the floor, ashamed and afraid, and the neighbors outside lifted their phones higher, capturing the image that would define the night. The man standing calm and strong while Karen collapsed into shadows, her power gone, the officers looking to him for guidance, the people siding with him, the shift complete. The empire she built with arrogance had been shattered by silence, truth, and the will of those she had tried to crush. Karen was no longer the queen of the lake. She was a fraud exposed under the harsh light of reality, and the man who never raised his voice now stood as the center of power, holding the truth that no one could take from him. The station had turned into a stage. Every eye fixed on the man, every phone outside recording, the chant of the neighbors echoing like a storm through the glass. "No more HO, no more HO." The clerk's stamp still lay fresh on the deeds, The officers stood firm, their loyalty clear. Karen shook where she stood, her breath ragged. Her once perfect hair tangled across her face, her red lipstick smeared into the cracks of her trembling mouth. Her voice came weak now, broken. Please, listen to me. You can't do this. You can't just take everything. I built this community. I kept it alive. I was protecting them. But her words carried no weight. The board members behind her had already stepped away, their faces pale, ashamed, desperate to save themselves. The taller officer turned his back on her and faced the man instead, his tone steady, respectful. Sir, the law is clear. This property belongs to you. The HOA's claims were false. We will be filing reports about the board's actions. You have nothing to answer for. His words spread like thunder. The neighbors outside erupted in cheers, clapping, shouting. Their relief raw and loud. Karen staggered forward, grabbing at the counter, her eyes wild. No, you can't just erase me. I am the HO. I am the law. But her screams were swallowed by the roar of truth, her power shattered, her empire dust. The man finally stepped forward, his boots heavy on the floor, his calm presence drawing every gaze. He placed his hand on the deeds, lifted them gently, and looked across the room. His voice low but clear, each word sharp as a blade. For years you threatened me. For years you fined me. And for years you claimed what was not yours. Tonight you called the police to end me. But all you did was end yourself. His eyes swept to Karen, her knees shaking, her pride broken. You wanted me arrested. But it's you who trespassed, you who stole, you who lied. Silence fell heavy after his words. The clerk nodded firmly, stamping another page. Records confirm it. She has no claim and never did. One officer stepped toward Karen, his voice calm but edged with warning. Ma'am, you may want to get legal counsel, because this looks a lot like fraud. Karen's mouth fell open, her body sagging. The board members backed away further, their loyalty gone. The neighbors outside chanted louder, some shouting her name like a curse, others calling the man a hero. Karen's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking. Please, don't let them take everything from me. But no one listened anymore. She had ruled with fear, and now fear had abandoned her. The man tucked the deeds back into his leather folder, held it tight under his arm, and walked past her slowly. His silence more powerful than any insult. The crowd parted for him, the officers stepping aside with respect, the neighbors cheering as he stepped out into the night, the cool air rushing against his face, the chants rising higher, phones capturing every second of his walk. He stopped at the edge of the lot, turned once to look at the crowd, his voice calm but final. This lake is mine. This land is mine. And from this night forward, no one will steal from this community again. His words spread across the crowd like fire. The neighbors raised their fists, their cheers shaking the night. Karen collapsed inside the station, sinking to the floor, her crown gone, her power erased, and the man walked into the darkness calm, steady, untouchable. The truth his shield, the deeds his sword, his silence the final verdict that ended the reign of fear forever.